Well, thank you, Scott. It goes way downhill from there, is all I can say. I told him limit it to 10 seconds, and I don't know, somehow he missed get to the punchline pretty quick on that. So, Scott, thank you, though. I appreciate it. So, a little funny story before we start. I have a good friend. His name is David Olke, and most of you know him. And David calls me up because we're doing some things together, and he calls me up out of the blue, and he goes, look, I got this Bible study in Houston, and was wondering if you might come down and just talk about real estate, and then just talk a little bit about your faith and kind of how it works. And I said, sure, David, you know, when do you want to do it? And he goes, yeah, it's very casual. Just come up, mix it up. And I said, great. Send me some logistics. So Tom sends me this email, and it's all about Toolbox. And I went, you got to be kidding me. Seriously? What an organization, and what speakers you've been able to get from secretaries of state and famous athletes and phenomenal businessmen that are here. I watched some of the videos. I mean, I go work for LaRue. I'd quit my job tomorrow and go be a window washer with LaRue, for those of you that saw him. And so I immediately called them up and I said, guys, I'm going to give you a do-over here. I mean, you need to opt out. You need to go find a real speaker here, and let's go do this the right way. And they said, no, be good. I just want you to know up front, I tried to protect the integrity of the organization here before we got going. So we thought, gosh, I need the clicker. Behind it? There we go. So we thought that it'd be good to talk a little bit about real estate for 10 minutes or so, and I'll give you a very high-level overview. I don't want to bore those that aren't in real estate about real estate, and then we'll jump into a little faith discussion. So on the real estate front, you have some myths that have been going around, and I'm sure the myths are in every industry, but in real estate, centered really around work from home. So myself and JLL have taken a pretty hard stance on this because we have a lot of information about office and users from our tenant rep business and corporate outsourcing business with the Global 500 companies, et cetera. And we're very bullish on office and people needing to go back to work in a collaborative, team-oriented environment in order to take your business forward. You can tread water really good, and we've learned how to be productive, work from home, but I've been in real estate a long time. And B of A and Yahoo had some really interesting experiences on this entire topic 7 years ago, and they were crushed because they lost their culture, they lost their people, and things didn't happen. So if you really want to boil down the work from home and the go back to office, there's raging debate, but the most interesting component of it for me is the technology companies who've been talking their book. They want you to use their product, and yet they've been the most voracious consumers of real estate over the last 15 months of any industry out there. So 50% of the absorption in the United States is going to the technology companies. So that tells you where their mind is. So it's just interesting, and there's going to be more debate about it, but if you boil it down, the net of this is it centers around competition. So if you're Jamie Dimon, let's talk about external competition. If you're Jamie Dimon and you tell people to go back to work, which he has done, and they start performing, which they will, what do you think B of A and Wells Fargo and PNC and everyone else is going to do? And then you think about internal competition, and you think about someone being on a Zoom call and their supervisor, their manager, or their whoever is in the office, and you see your internal competition hanging around the hoop around the person that'll pay you more money and give you a promotion, what are you going to do? So competition both externally and internally are going to be a factor here, even though I think there will be a lot more flexibility in work schedules and work balance, and I think that's a great thing. I think it keeps more people in the labor force, and that's interesting. So we don't think the office is dead. In fact, we're very bullish the opposite way. Retail's dead, gone forever, never going to come back. Everybody's going to buy everything online. Well, retail spending's up dramatically, and the store volumes are up pre-COVID levels. What's really happened here are outdated business models are gone. So if you look at a department store, pick one, you know, their business models are outdated, haven't changed them in 30 years. So all COVID did was really accelerate the inevitable, and that's happening fast paced. So there are plenty of retailers doing extraordinarily great, and there are plenty that aren't. And the question is, it's just a paradigm shift, and what we think happened, this is COVID just really accelerated what was happening in any event, just going to happen in a couple years versus 10. Suburban flight will end the gateway. So if you think about New York, San Francisco, Chicago, because California, Illinois, and New York have been the largest losers of population and employment over the last 24 months, that is not a new trend. So this trend was happening pre-COVID for a host of reasons, all of which you know. It just accelerated through COVID and some other issues that emerged that are now being looked after. Having said that, they're not going away. And we're seeing some reverse migration back into those markets. It's just going to take longer, and there's a host of reasons for that. We don't have time to get into it, but you don't write those markets off either. And then distress will be robust. You know, we're going to have all of this carnage and opportunities to buy for those of you that are investors. And so now it's 2 strikes and you're out type thing, because they said it in 08, 09, it didn't happen. And they said it in COVID, and it certainly didn't happen. How many people own second homes here? Yeah. What's happened? How many people are trying to buy a second home? Did anybody predict that coming? So there's not really been this distress that everyone was talking about. So in real estate, we probably couldn't have been, if you're in real estate, you could not have picked a better industry at a better time, because the liquidity that is coming into real estate is extraordinary. It's at an all-time high, the highest it's ever been in our history. And the why is because it's performed. So that's number one. Number two, allocations are rising because fixed income is declining. So if you're a Texas State teacher's retirement system, typically 30% of your portfolio was in fixed income in some form or fashion. There's this thing called an actuarial rate, which is the rate of investment return you have to get in order to meet the obligations that you promised your constituency. So whatever the retirement benefits were, the teachers promised their teachers, they have to get that rate. Well, that rate's about 7.5%. You're not going to get that with 30% of your portfolio earning 1%. So what do? Well, you start reallocating, and they're reallocating to alternatives. Real estate's the largest alternative. We've gotten a huge amount of flow out of what we call fixed income rotation. So now they're looking at real estate and going, oh, well, geez, there's a fixed income surrogate. So that's where we'll go, and the best fixed income surrogate happens to be multi-housing and industrial, because they're low capital expenditures. They don't take as much money to operate as maybe retail or office might. So that's where the vast majority of this new liquidity is going in, and it's causing some issues. So we could talk about some time there, but that is where the liquidity has been heading. And then, as I stated, on the liquidity front, it's across the board. So whether it's an M&A trade or a sale or a financing or preferred equity or whatever it is, there's abundant capital across really every single flavor of capital in every product type. The participants are as diverse as we have ever seen them. So you have domestic institutions, you have overseas sovereign funds coming in, you have high net worth, what I would call ultra high net worth individuals that act more like an institution. Then you have the mutual funding and the retail investor in real estate. We now have vehicles like a Blackstone B REIT. Blackstone B REIT, by the way, last month raised $3 billion of equity in a month. So the mutual funding of real estate and the retail investor is very real. And then you have the public REITs, which are also active. So we have all of the flavors of capital playing, and you're asking, well, what are the motivations? Well, the motivations are real estate has proved to be a great store of wealth, long-term store of wealth. You get a current return, but you also get an inflation hedge. And so everybody's a little concerned about inflation. The replacement costs continue to go up. So that's good. And when you look at the overall construct of a portfolio, it needs to be a growing part, which is why the allocations are increasing. And if you're selling because you're scared to death of cap gains, taxes going up, or your fund structure is mandating it, or you have other issues of working capital needs that you need to do it. So at this moment, it's an incredibly robust market, and really, really exciting to be in. Business models are changing rapidly. So in real estate, I'm sure like in other industries that I'm aware of, you have an investment management business where you have money managers that are investing in real estate and they're focused only on real estate. And then you have the owner-operator developers. So you take, in Houston, let's take the Hines family, who we know well. So if you look at the Hines family, they started out as an owner-operator developer. Well, now they have merged into an investment manager. So they're also a money manager. If you look at Blackstone, I just mentioned them a minute ago, they started out as a money manager or an investment management company, and now they have changed their business model and morphed into an owner-operator developer. So the business models are merging for a host of reasons here, and M&A activity as a result is at an all-time high. Scott and I are working on over 100 platforms doing just that structure of M&A activity across the board. Mentioned gateways briefly, that they're not going to go away, but at the same time, they're also not going to perform nearly as well as non-gateways. So if you look, we're so fortunate to be in Texas, but if you look at the Southeast and South, pretty much any non-major gateway market off the coast, you're seeing enormous growth, both in population and employment for all these reasons. And that's not going to stop, and it existed pre-COVID, accelerated during COVID. In real estate, it's a pretty simple industry. If you have more people coming and more employers coming, prices go up. So you can see where the investments are being made, and Texas is a huge destination for both domestic and overseas capital into the state as a result. And pricing has reacted to all of what I'm stating here, in that it has compressed, so what we call a cap rate or a current yield has compressed almost 100 basis points over the last 12 months, 25 basis points in the last 90 days. You have some pricing to perfection, so people are a little concerned about pricing and some of the low capex property types that we were chatting about, and therefore you have rotation of capital because they're frustrated with their inability to deploy going into office and retail and hospitality. We're doing quite a bit of hotels as well. So the summary for the real estate side of things, it's really never been better in my career over an extended period of time. So it's grown up, the industry's grown up, you have very sophisticated players playing it, and you have an enormous amount of liquidity looking to make a play, and you have a lot of innovation happening. So it's an exciting place to be and really, really fun to be a part of. It's a privilege to be there. So with that, I'm gonna jump backwards a little bit here and get out of that. And we'll just talk about faith and how that has applied to business. And I'll tell you, first of all, it's just really humbling and a privilege to be here. You have a great organization here. And I've never actually done this, so this is the first time. And when David invited me down, I was thinking there's 15 people, and there's not 15 people. So well, hopefully it goes. But before I get going, just a couple of things. One is we're going to reason together here. I'm just going to tell you what has occurred in my life and how I've reacted to it. It doesn't mean it's right. I'm a work in progress. Maybe I was 3 steps forward and 2.5 steps back in my 20s and 30s, and maybe in my early 60s I'm 3 steps forward and 1.5 back. I don't know, somewhere in that range. But still a work in progress across the board. And so what I'm going to speak about today is my aspiration. Not that I actually do it every day. And it's important for me to get out at the beginning. So I've looked back over time, and there have been 4 events that were impactful. There have been hundreds of events, as you can imagine, all your lives. But there have been 4 that I remember distinctly that have impacted my walk in faith. And the first one happened to be here in Houston. And I grew up, as Scott said, close to Bel Air. I actually went to elementary school at Herod Elementary, so I lived right on the border of Beach Nut and Renwick. I don't even know what it looks like today, but I was right on the border of Bel Air High School, so I lucked into Bel Air High School too. But I was riding home in the 2nd grade from Herod, and I was going home, and there was this church at the corner of Beach Nut and Renwick, and I heard this voice. And again, I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying, I'm just telling you what happened. Whether it was audible or not, I don't know. But it said, get off your bike, go over to that church and pray. And I went, okay. So the church was locked, just got on my knees, 2nd grade, prayed. From that point on, I just knew God existed. I didn't have to be convinced that He existed, I knew He existed. Went home, my folks were not churchy people, they didn't go to church. And I said, hey, I'd like to go to church and figure out what this is all about. And they go, what in the world is happening to this dude? 2nd grade and coming home. Really? Let's go think about it. So that was interesting because I just always knew there was a presence there. The second impactful time was my grandparents lived in a small town in Alabama, and I spent every summer with them until I was about 15. And I became very close to my grandmother, and she developed lung cancer. This is 50 years ago. I was 12 years old now, and had to have a lung removed. She died on the operating table, and they brought her back, but she had a near-death experience. So after that operation, and she recovered a little bit, I was visiting with her, and she called me in, and she goes, you know, I have something to tell you, but you can't tell anyone. I said, okay. She goes, I died on that operating table. Yeah, I know that. And they brought it back. They go, yeah, but Mark, what you don't know is I came out of my body and I was looking over the doctors. And I saw everything they were doing. I saw your mom, saw your aunt, saw everybody there. I saw everything they were doing. Saw this bright light. I knew it was Jesus. I was talking to him. It was incredible. And it was such an incredible, peaceful time. But I said, you know, I want to be here, but at the same time, my family needs me. I have work to do. I want to get back. Next thing I knew, woke up. Doctor was looking at me, told him the whole story. He said, I think anesthesia's had a problem on your brain. So she's a country girl, 50 years ago. None of this has been published. The white light hovering above the body, none of this had been out. We're talking 50 years ago in rural Alabama. And she was scared to death they were going to commit her. So she didn't tell anybody. And she made me promise that I wouldn't tell anybody. And I held that promise until she passed away. About 10 years ago. The third element was Spain, or the third impactful situation in my life was Spain. And my wife was 6 months pregnant, and I had just closed a deal where I could actually pay off debt. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and really wanted to get out of some debt, and did that and could actually breathe. I said, look, I want to get, I'm pretty close to being fluent in Spanish. I want to go to an immersion deal. I'll cheat if I go to Mexico, because they speak English. Let me go to Spain. She goes, yeah, go do it. So I went to Spain, enrolled in this university, and I was there 5 days, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, I don't know how this sounds, but it just happened. There's the voice again. And the voice said, hey, Mark, get up, pack your clothes, and go home. And I went, what? It so startled me, I just bolted straight up. And I said, what was that? And they go, I thought somebody was talking to me from a hallway, Spanish, probably didn't understand it, and said, get up, pack your clothes, and go home, with an emphasis on now. And I went, got it. Got up, packed clothes, wait for the lady to wake up, paid her a check, went to school, told them I had an emergency. How do I get to Madrid? 2-hour drive, took a bus, flight home to Houston. This is early 30s when this happened. Called my wife and I said, hey, how are you? Let me tell you the story. And she was in New York on a business trip, again, 6 months pregnant. And she goes, I'm great. I goes, okay, I'll call my parents. I'll call my parents. Hey, how are you guys? Great. Told them the story, and they go, well, that's bizarre. And I go, well, look, nobody's expecting me back. For a week until Friday, I'll come see you guys. And I hadn't slept, so that whole circle just went all the way through, caught another flight, went to see them in Alabama. And then that morning, my wife calls in a panic because she went into labor in a hotel room in New York. And we're talking 30 years ago, so going into labor with 6 months was kind of dicey. They saved the baby, it took 2 weeks, and we were there when we came home. And then finally, the fourth element that was impactful was I went to Cuba, and there's a ministry here by the name of East-West Ministries that maybe some of you have heard of, and a guy named John Mazel, who's become a really good friend of mine. And so he takes heathens like me and some of my buddies, and we go to Cuba, and we go to these unreached places in the world, and they say, look, we'll give you a translator, and you go tell them about your faith, and you go do that. And I go, wow, John, I don't know if I really want to do that, actually. And he goes, no, you'd be great, and we'll do it. We'll get all your buddies, and we'll go do that together. So we did it. And as part of the preparation, he said, look, there's a track, and it's 45 seconds. And all you got to do is tell about your faith. This 45-second track, that's all you got to do. And you go in there, and he goes, Mark, look, 99% is just showing up. 1% is you. So just get out of the way, let it work, and make it happen. I said, great. So we're going down there, and of course I'm on the plane, I'm thinking about it, and I'm going, I I don't want to do that. I mean, I present for a living. I do pitches. I'm going to gussy this thing up. I'm going to make it the best presentation of the gospel ever seen to man. So I go in this house. The Cuban authorities didn't want us there. They eventually evicted us with some machine guns at us, and they didn't want us. It was unnerving. You had no support at all. You're by yourself with a translator, and you go in this house, and there's 30 or so people crammed into this small house, and you start talking. Well, I gave them my whiz-bang presentation. 15 minutes. I said, how many people will accept Jesus? 0 hands went up. Walk out, and I said this prayer. I said, Lord, I'm so sorry about this. I'm humbled that I somehow thought I needed to sell your word. I'm out of the way. Let's go do the 45-second prayer. Walk in the next house, did the 45-second, as bland as I possibly could. How many people want to accept Jesus? Every single hand went up. And I go, message received. Got it. So I've had those experiences. So what do you do with that? And that's been a question and a pursuit, and an intellectual pursuit, really since I was 12 years old. So I had it here. I knew God was there. But I had to get my mind around it intellectually. So I asked all the hard questions. And I started here in Houston with a guy named Jack Modisette. I don't know if you guys know Jack Modisette. Then Ed Young, because they taught scripture, and I really wanted to hear it, but I had all these tough questions. And I've been blessed to have a bunch of brilliant theologians, many of whom now have become quite famous, that I asked these tough questions to. And it took me a while to get my mind intellectually around it, to match it with what I knew was present after experiencing these things. And so my takeaways from all this, and maybe you can agree with some of them, maybe not, but where I've concluded is this. One is, we're given time and talent and treasure, and we're meant to share it. So we're not meant to hoard it, and we're meant to give it to any and everyone we come across that you've been brought into your path in some form or fashion. So that's a takeaway. The second is we have one life to live, and there are no do-overs. And I think about that quite a bit. So for me, anyway, I've just said, well, heck with it. Let's give it all we got. Why not live every single day, leaving it all in the field, and be excellent at everything we do? Because we're not working for ourselves. You're not working for shareholders. I mean, I am working for shareholders, but I'm working for God. So I don't think any of us want to go home to our kids and go, man, I got to tell you, I was so mediocre today. It was great. It was just awesome. You too ought to try and be mediocre. Let's go give it all we got, because we don't know when it's going to end. But there's no do-over. And most of us have been given a second chance. And we go, I kind of messed up. Can I have, I'll do better next time. Well, there's no better next time when that happens. The third takeaway was there's going to be a conversation when we get to that point in our life when our life is over. So our last breath here is our first breath in heaven. And we're going to have a conversation. I know that. So I want it to be a good conversation. I've had bad conversations. I'd like for that one to be a good conversation, because there's no do-over. And so the question that I had for myself was, well, how do I do that? And my answer was, why don't I just live life backwards? So I know that is inevitable. I don't know why people get a little nerved up about death, because if there's one certainty, it's that. So let's plan for it. So I am a planner. So let's think about it. So what is that conversation going to sound like and look like? I know it's going to happen. So what does God value? It's really been my search, intellectual. What is that? And all of you would have different answers to that question. My answer to the question is people. So he cares most about people. And how do we deal with that, both in our lives, and how do we deal with that in a business context? So transitioning to business, and I'll wrap up here. Here's how we've applied it to business. First off, before I get started, there's this one scripture that sticks with me. This Pharisee was asking Jesus, what are the most important commandments out of the 10 Commandments? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, love your neighbor as yourself. And then the guy said, yeah, who's your neighbor? He told the story about the Samaritan, who was this despised race. Well, any of you out there that like college football and trash talk college football, like to drink red wine and go hunting and fishing, I can be a great neighbor to you, okay? We can have some good conversations. But when I started applying it to the business world today, myself and a couple other guys, we're overseeing 45,000 people in the United States. So you can imagine the type of behavior issues that we have to deal with, from addiction to infidelity to just pure stupidity and everything in between. And what do you do with that? Well, every other corporation and partnership would fire them because of the legal liability to not do it. And we don't. So the first application is we give them a second chance because all of us needed a second chance. There are consequences. It's tough love, but you made a mistake. Here are the consequences. If you're willing to take the consequences, pay the legal expenses, do the counseling, whatever it may be, we'll give you another shot. One of the most fulfilling things that I've had in my career is how many lives have been changed with a second chance. So it's an amazing outcome. The second is share the wealth. So everybody talks team, all companies talk about team. We're all team until it comes to a dollar bill on the table. Then it's all about me. We just say, let's share the wealth. There's no socialism there, it's all value add. You gotta hit the pitching every day. Share the wealth. It would be incredibly arrogant for one or two people to say that they were the reason for success in any endeavor. It takes, I've never found one person good enough to run a business. I just haven't. Third is you do everything you do with integrity, honor, and you tell the truth no matter the circumstances. The fourth is be a player, coach, servant, leader. So I don't know how you run a business if you're not setting the example. To set the example, you have to be present. And they have to see the integrity and the honor and the truth. They have to see that you got their back. You have to see that you're going to really recognize value add and share the wealth. And you have to do it. Because if you're talking it and not walking it, you lose all your credibility. And we have seen that over and over. And then finally, the final story is a John Mazer story. So I sat there, I was probably mid-40s, and I didn't feel like my life was as significant as I wanted it to be. So I said, John, let's go to lunch. And again, this guy's the closest thing to a modern-day Paul I've ever seen. And we went to lunch, and he's about 15, 20 years older than I am. And I said, no, I said, John, look, I'm thinking about retiring and resigning and becoming a full-time missionary and moving the family to Africa. And he looks at me, and he was just quiet for about 20 seconds. Never heard him curse, except for that lunch. And he looks at me and he goes, Gibson, you are so full. And I went, why? And he goes, you wouldn't last 2 weeks. And I go, I damn sure would. What are you talking about? I can do this. And he goes, Mark, seriously, I can't meet with anyone you meet with every day. Do you not see that the platform that God has given you is much more powerful and every bit as noble as being a missionary in Africa? We're all been given platforms in which to work. And you are a mission. What do you mean? You are doing that and making it. It totally changed my perspective in merging my faith and the real mission in life with my vocation and a passion that I have to compete in business and help others. And if we can somehow do that, it's been a pretty cool ride in that regard. So I think we're at the end of the time, Tom, and I hope some of this was impactful or helpful. And again, a very heartfelt thank you for inviting me down here. It's a privilege to be here. So thank you for coming out.